So there are a lot of talking points to be made around this election. You could argue there's talking points to be made around every election, but I think specifically this one because it is has been very unusual in many ways. It really is the Brexit election. I've just had a slot on LBC on the Matt Stadland show, and I'm going to echo some of the things I said in that column. But what I'm going to do is break this down into sort of segments rather than talking about all the issues. I'll break it down into segments. So bear with me. Um, Let me focus for this video purely on the Conservative success as opposed to Corbynism and so on. And I might just read out what I've actually written on my Facebook update because it's kind of summed up how I feel about this and how I feel about what has happened. So I think that Corbyn probably done personally better in the head-to-head debates. I think that there was open ridicule of. I'm just reading my own script here, but it's got all the information there. I mean, there was open ridicule of Johnson in the debates um, on trust. There were some outright Tory distortions, so-called fact-check site, and Johnson avoided the most meticulous interviews, notably by Andrew Neil. Um, but the pitch of getting Brexit done as a pitch, I don't think can be underestimated. It's Trumpian in the sense it is like make America great again. It's just it's a populist, straightforward pitch. He's going to have to do it now, as he said, because I think if Brexit isn't delivered this time, then the anger from leavers will be such that I don't know. I think the damage will be irreparable. Um, what's notable from last night is this so-called lending the Conservative Party votes thing. And I have to say, I find that quite alarming because it's like a lot of people put aside any concerns they may have had or the obvious Tory record, which is an increase in rough sleeping, an increase in food banks, an increase in the social malign that we have in this country. That has been on the Tory watch. I think a lot of traditional Labour people have put all that to the side because it's this thing, this dogmatic, zealous, get Brexit done. And we keep hearing about the will of the people. But let's not forget, we hear about the 17.4 million, but there were also 16 million people who saw it another way, and they lost, including myself. But I get a little bit tired of this attitude of, well, the people have spoken, therefore everyone else who has spoken needs to shut up. I've always said that it's one of my major contentions with Brexit is the fact that it's been this kind of black and white thing of, everything will be fine when we get out. And it's like hatred for the EU by certain Labours supersedes everything else. Years of being traditional Labour voters, it's something I find hard to understand. But before anyone accuses me of being a liberal elite, I understand the contention. They made their votes. There was a mandate for leave. Leave won. And so there is a democratic responsibility to deliver that. So when the Prime Minister clearly made his pitch, we'll get it done. People obviously bought into that, and he's going to have to do it now. Um, so obviously there was a lot of tactical stuff going on with the Brexit Party, or rather UKIP stepping down in a lot of seats. But another thing Johnson done, despite the fact he was a senior minister in their governments, he detached himself from the Cameron May era. So all the austerity that's associated with them, Cameron May, Osborne, it's just been kind of dismissed. It's almost like people are treating Johnson like a newcomer. And although he's a new prime minister, he's certainly not a newcomer. I mean, he was a central figure in these governments. And Johnson, if you look at his record, has always been in lieu to the upper echelons of society. I do not believe that Johnson really cares about the most vulnerable people in society. Um, but he's a larger than life figure, and that carries more weight than perhaps it should. The energy, the charisma, it has an effect. People are taken in by it. Um, but how does it explain where, deep red Labour seats like Bishop Auckland and Workington can lose Labour MPs after decades? In a sense, it's not entirely a bad thing because no party should have the situation where they kind of own a seat. And one of the contentions in Labour heartlands, and you'll probably find this in Tory heartlands as well, is this kind of, I think some people feel that the ruling party is almost complacent. Now, I don't think that's the case in Sunderland Central. I don't think that is not the attitude I've seen from Julie Elliott. I don't think she is complacent. I think she does work hard. Um, but it just shows no MP can sort of take it for granted that their seat is safe. The whole idea of safe seats is maybe something that needs to be challenged. Um, I just hope that the next election, this Brexit thing will not be a factor. I will say this though: if things go south, if when we come out there is a recession and things go badly, I hope that Leave people will accept that they cannot blame that on the EU. They cannot blame that on the Remain side. So I almost want us to leave for that reason, so that they can no longer continue to vilify the Remain side as they have been doing. Even vilifying their own side, people who are not deemed to be Brexiteer enough. I mean, it is a purist, puritanical, dogmatic, oh, only no deal leavers are acceptable sort of attitude. It's unsettling. So I think what's happened in deep red seats where there is a strong leave contingent, people dislike the EU, they have voted against MPs that they deem to be Remainers. I don't think it's I think the Corbyn issue is almost separate to that. People also didn't vote for Corbyn for a lot of reasons. I'll be covering that in the next video, but they're almost separate issues. I do think, though, the fact that Corbyn was on the fence with Brexit didn't help. So these people wanted some clarity, and for them, it was get Brexit done. I know a lot of angry people who are traditional Labour voters and who hate Brexit are angry with these people because they say that they've basically shot themselves in the foot. Now, I think it's a little patronising to sort of lecture people on how to vote and the reasons that they did vote, but I do find it perplexing. And I know of people in this city whose sole mantra is, oh, it's about Brexit, get Brexit done, like nothing else matters. And I find that alarming. So that's why I hope this is the last election where Brexit is a major issue. I really, really do. I suspect it'll be a good 5 years before our next general election, 4 minimum, because people are fatigued now with elections and referendums. So we want the dust to settle. That'll be probably 2025 will be the next election, or 2024. Um, so who knows what could happen in this Conservative government. I know my gut feeling is that when the Tories are in power, the most vulnerable suffer. Those on the margins of society suffer. That's why I fundamentally cannot bring myself to vote Conservative, because I do not believe that they have those at the bottom at heart. I'll be making a whole video about Labour and where Labour went wrong in the next video. Um, but it's. I don't think this is necessarily an endorsement of Tory ideology. I mean, the Prime Minister himself said that he understood a lot of these were Lent votes. Apparently, he's going to the Northeast today. Whether he's coming here again or not, I don't know, to presumably campaign and try and get to keep those votes. But elections can change radically. Don't forget that in 2017, the Conservatives made big sweeps in Scotland. They've now lost that again, and the SNP have once again replicated what they've done in 2015. Not quite as sweeping. They've got 48 seats in 2015. It was 55, but they clearly had a very good night. So politics can go up and down. Just because the Tories had a very good showing last night doesn't mean they can be complacent. Um, if Labour goes in the right direction, and I'll be speaking about that in the next video, then they could recuperate. Um, but put it this way, if Labour was out of power for 18 years, 1979 to 1997, if we're seeing that sort of situation, um, then they're not going to be in power for at least another 10 years. So it's going to be a long wilderness period. And for those who are socialists or social democrats or on the left, that's profoundly depressing. Um, but I'll be touching on in the next video why I think that people have turned against Corbyn and Corbynism. I think there's a lot of reasons. My personal feeling is I hate Brexit. I'm not going to lie about it. I hate it. I hate what it's done to this country. I hate the uncertainty that it's caused. But that's part of the issue because there is so much uncertainty. If if getting out ends that, then that is a good thing. Now, people, the rebuke to that will be, oh, it's Remainer MPs that have caused the uncertainty by blocking Brexit, and I concede that to some extent. But in the end of the day, it isn't the Remain side that asked for this constant standoff with our closest European neighbours. It isn't the Remain side that sort of, um, well, it's. I mean, I just don't understand this obsession that Leavers have with the EU. And they can argue that hardline Remainers. I think Caroline Flint was actually right. She said both sides. You can see this on both sides, with the zealotry from both camps. I mean, overzealous Remainers are also a problem. I totally recognise that because they overreact the other way, where they think they're too dystopian about Brexit. They think like the day we leave, we're going to fall apart. I don't think it's that bad, but at the same time, I I can see a lot of problems happening. If it's a clean break, it may be that we can secure good trade arrangements. But if if the very existence of the British Union comes into question, and in the worst case scenario, the United Kingdom breaks up, all I can say is I hope the Leave people are happy because taking back control will have become literally Little England. It's just the idea of the United Kingdom breaking up over this is now a possibility, and it's really depressing. It's worth mentioning, although Johnson had a great night, his Tory still didn't get the largest popular vote share ever, which still belongs to John Major's 1992 showing, which is kind of ironic. Major, being the pro-European. His Tories in 1992 still had a stronger showing than the Tories last night. I mean, I'm not downplaying the success. They had a clear victory, but that's kind of significant. Could be that we had a lower turnout this time. But I would just close with this. Johnson's right to not take it for granted that a lot of people last night will have just lent him their support. Um, when he says it's time now to end austerity, I hope he means that because austerity have hit. The fact of the matter is, when you hit public services, the people that rely on that are going to suffer. And we have seen this rise in suffering in the country. It's irrefutable. If you look at the rates of rough sleeping, the usage of food banks, and a host of other factors compared to the Labour period, the contrast is obvious. Now, Corbyn's far left sort of ultra radical programme probably would have caused a lot of hardship as well. But that, there was a resounding rejection of that. So I'll leave it there. I'll be making other videos on the Labour side of things and also on the media role and perhaps a conclusion. We'll see.